October 5th, 1943, the moment the sky changed. October 5th, 1943, 18,000 feet above the Central Pacific. The air is thin and painfully bright, the kind of blue that only exists far above the ocean. Sunlight flashes off aluminum wings and rippling canopies. Inside his Mitsubishi A6M Zero, Warrant Officer Toshiyuki Sueda breathes steadily through his oxygen mask, eyes scanning the sky with practiced calm. He has done this before. 9 times, to be exact. 9 American fighters destroyed, each one beaten the same way, each one falling exactly as expected. Below his formation, an American fighter is climbing. Sueda banks slightly, angling his Zero to get a better look. The silhouette is familiar. Broad wings, stubby proportions, a bulky fuselage capped by a framed greenhouse canopy. Even from this distance, he recognizes it instantly. An F4F Wildcat. The same American fighter he has outclimbed, outturned, and outkilled since the first months of the war. A thin smile touches his lips. He presses the radio switch with gloved confidence. Another Wildcat coming up to die, he tells his wingman. I will take this one myself. The Zero responds to his touch like an extension of his body. Light, sensitive, alive. Japanese engineers built it to do exactly this. Climb hard, turn tighter than anything in the sky, bleed speed, and regain it effortlessly. Against Wildcats, the equation has always been simple. Lure them up. Let gravity and engine limits do the killing. Sueda begins his setup. He pushes the throttle forward and pulls the stick back, pitching the Zero into a steep vertical climb. The nose points toward the sun. The engine screams, propeller biting at the air. This is the killing maneuver. A vertical climbing loop that has already written 9 epitaphs. The heavier American fighter will follow. It always follows. Then it will stall. And when it does, Sueda will roll over at the apex and dive straight down, guns blazing, into a helpless, falling target. Below him, Ensign Robert Duncan tightens his grip on the stick. Duncan is 23 years old. This is his second combat mission. Sweat beads under his helmet despite the cold. His aircraft is new, so new that it still smells faintly of oil, rubber, and factory paint. He flies a Grumman F6F Hellcat, powered by a Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine producing 2,000 horsepower. The most powerful radial engine ever bolted to a single-seat fighter. Duncan watches the Zero pitch upward. His training officer's voice echoes in his head, drilled into him over and over back in the States. If a Zero tries to outclimb you, follow him up. Do not break early. The Hellcat will surprise him every time. Duncan pushes the throttle through the gate. The engine roars, a deep mechanical thunder that vibrates through the cockpit and into his bones. The massive Hamilton Standard propeller, 13 feet across, digs into the thinning air with brutal authority. The Hellcat climbs. 14,000 feet. 15,000. The Zero is still ahead, still climbing, but something is wrong. From Sueda's cockpit, the American fighter should already be falling away. He expects to see the Wildcat's nose wobble, its prop disc shudder, its wings begin to mush as lift disappears. It does not happen. The American is still there. Sueda glances over his shoulder, disbelief creeping into his thoughts. The fighter behind him is not losing ground. It is gaining. The climb angle is wrong. The spacing is wrong. Everything about this is wrong. The R2800's 2-stage supercharger feeds dense air into Duncan's engine as altitude increases, maintaining power where older American fighters would already be choking. The Hellcat's climb rate matches the Zero's, foot for foot, second by second. And above 14,000 feet, it begins to exceed it. For the first time in his combat career, Toshiyuki Sueda feels uncertainty tighten in his chest. 16,000 feet. Both aircraft near the top of the loop. Airspeed bleeds away. Control surfaces soften. This is the most dangerous place in the sky. Slow. High. Exposed. Sueda expects to be alone here. King of the vertical, ready to roll and strike. Instead, the American fighter hangs with him. Robert Duncan sees the Zero's belly fill his gun sight. He does not hesitate. His thumb squeezes the trigger. 6 Browning M250 caliber machine guns fire as one. The Hellcat shudders as 2,400 rounds per minute tear out of its wings. The convergence is set for 300 yards. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds slam forward at nearly 3,000 feet per second, forming a tight cone of destruction no aircraft can survive. Tracers stitch across the Zero's fuselage. Metal tears. Fuel ignites. The Japanese fighter disintegrates in a violent bloom of flame, its unarmored fuel tank exploding behind the pilot's seat. In less than 3 seconds, the Zero ceases to exist as an airplane, breaking apart into burning fragments that tumble toward the ocean far below. Toshiyuki Sueda never hears the gunfire, never sees the rounds, never understands what went wrong. Robert Duncan pulls through the top of the loop, heart hammering, staring at the empty sky where an enemy ace had been moments before. He has just become the first man to shoot down a Zero in an F6F Hellcat. And in that instant, 18,000 feet above the Pacific, Japanese air superiority cracks. Shockwaves through the Pacific sky. The fireball fades quickly, swallowed by distance and altitude, leaving Robert Duncan alone in a suddenly quiet sky. For several seconds he does nothing. His hands remain locked on the controls. His breathing is loud in his helmet. Training says keep moving, keep scanning, never fixate. But his mind struggles to process what just happened. The Zero did not outclimb him. It did not escape. It did not survive. Below him, the Pacific stretches endlessly, calm and indifferent. Duncan banks away and reforms with his section, his Hellcat still climbing smoothly, as if nothing extraordinary has occurred. But something extraordinary has happened. Within minutes, Japanese radios across the area crackle with confused, urgent transmissions. American fighters climbing like Zeros. At first, Japanese controllers assume exaggeration, perhaps excitement, perhaps a misidentification. American pilots have always tried to follow Zeros upward. They have always failed. But as more reports come in from different units, different altitudes, different encounters, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The Americans are still there. That same morning, over Wake Island, the pattern repeats itself on a far larger scale. 91 F6F Hellcats from Task Force 14 climb toward 50 Mitsubishi A6M Zeros orbiting above the atoll. The Japanese pilots are veterans. Many have survived Guadalcanal, the Solomons, months of brutal attrition where experience was the only currency that mattered. They see the American formation and feel no fear. They have beaten Wildcats and P-40s and P-39s. This will be no different. They initiate the climb. The Zeros pitch up together, engines screaming, noses pointed toward the sun. The Americans follow. The Japanese pilots wait for the moment when gravity and horsepower will betray their enemies. They wait for the American formation to thin, for aircraft to stall and drop away. They wait for the familiar opening. It never comes. The Hellcats climb in tight formation, engines pulling strongly, maintaining spacing, maintaining speed. At 14,000 feet, they are still there. At 16,000, they are closer. At 18,000 feet, the impossible becomes undeniable. The Americans are climbing with them. Confusion spreads through the Japanese formation. Pilots break radio discipline, calling out in disbelief. This should not be happening. Their tactics are built on vertical dominance. Without it, the Zero is just a lightly built fighter with thin skin and no armor. At 20,000 feet, the Hellcats roll over as one. They dive. The attack is brutally simple. No turning fight. No attempt to match the Zero's agility. The Hellcats convert altitude into speed, plunging through the Japanese formation at nearly 400 miles per hour. 6-gun batteries erupt in short, precise bursts. Zeros explode, burn, or simply disintegrate as 50 caliber rounds tear through wings and fuselages. Japanese pilots try to turn. The Hellcats refuse to follow. They blast through, extend, then climb back to altitude with the same terrifying confidence. By the time the sky clears, 28 Zeros are gone. 2 Hellcats do not return. 14-1. For the first time since 1941, Japanese pilots return from a major engagement shaken, not triumphant. Their debriefs are fragmented, emotional, filled with phrases that make intelligence officers uneasy. They climb with us. They do not stall. They survive hits that would destroy any aircraft. Their guns kill instantly. The myth of American inferiority is collapsing in real time. The shock reaches Japanese command just as reports from Marcus Island begin to circulate. On August 31st, 1943, Hellcats had made their combat debut there, sweeping down on the isolated Japanese base in a coordinated carrier strike. At dawn, American fighters caught bombers parked wing to wing on the airfield, crews still asleep. Hellcats strafed methodically, their 6 guns turning aircraft, fuel dumps, and hangars into burning wreckage. For separate strikes throughout the day reduced most of the island's facilities to twisted metal. But it is the air-to-air encounters that disturb planners the most. On September 1st, 2 Hellcats from USS Independence intercept a Kawanishi H-8K Emily flying boat. The massive 4-engine aircraft opens fire at long range, its gunners confident in its defensive power. Lieutenant Richard Lowe does not flinch. He closes the distance, holding steady through incoming fire, then opens up at 400 yards. The result is immediate and catastrophic. The Emily's wing root explodes. Flames rip through the fuel tanks. The aircraft crashes into the sea, gone in seconds. It is the Hellcat's first confirmed aerial victory, and it sets the tone for everything that follows. What Japanese intelligence struggles to understand is how quickly this change has happened. The Hellcat is not the result of years of slow evolution. It is the product of focused rage, born from hard data and bitter loss. American engineers did not guess. They measured. They studied captured aircraft. They watched gun camera footage frame by frame. They asked why pilots were dying and what could stop it. The answer was not elegance. It was power, protection, and climb. Behind every Hellcat in the sky stands a decision made months earlier, when the United States Navy admitted something it had resisted since the start of the war. The Wildcat was no longer enough. That admission begins far from the Pacific, on Long Island, in a quiet office at the Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation, a place where blueprints cover tables, and the future of air combat is about to change. The decision that built a monster. April 1942. Bethpage, Long Island. The factory floor smells of oil, hot metal, and cigarette smoke. Outside, the Atlantic wind rattles the windows of Grumman's design offices, but inside, the atmosphere is heavier than the weather. Lieutenant Commander Edward Butch O'Hare sits across a table from Grumman's senior engineers, his flight jacket still creased from travel. He does not bother with pleasantries. "Your Wildcat is getting my pilots killed." The words hang in the air. O'Hare is already a legend. The Navy's first fighter ace of the war. A Medal of Honor recipient. A man whose opinions are backed by gun camera footage and funerals. When he speaks, engineers listen. He spreads photographs and reports across the table. Damaged F-4FS. Combat summaries. Engagement diagrams drawn in grease pencil. The pattern is undeniable. The Zero outclimbs the Wildcat. Outturns it. Outranges it. American pilots survive only by discipline, teamwork, and luck. But O'Hare brings something else with him. Intelligence reports from Alaska. In the Aleutian Islands, a Japanese Zero has crashed and been recovered largely intact. For the first time, American engineers have been able to fly, test, and tear apart the aircraft that has dominated the Pacific. What they find is both impressive and horrifying. The Zero's performance comes from extreme weight reduction. No armor behind the pilot. No self-sealing fuel tanks. Control surfaces so light they feel almost fragile in the hand. The aircraft is a masterpiece of efficiency, but it is also a flying risk. A few hits from heavy machine guns are enough to tear it apart. Grumman's chief engineer, William Schwendler, listens carefully. So does project engineer Bob Hall. They do not argue with O'Hare. They do not defend the Wildcat. Instead, they begin asking a different question. What if we do not try to outturn the Zero? The answer feels heretical in a world obsessed with dogfighting agility. But the data is clear. Trying to beat the Zero at its own game leads to dead pilots. Grumman decides to build something else entirely. A fighter that can climb with the Zero. A fighter that can dive faster. A fighter that can absorb punishment and keep flying. The first prototype, the XF6F1, flies on June 26, 1942, powered by a Wright R2600 engine producing 1,700 horsepower. It is solid, predictable, but not revolutionary. It does not yet deliver the leap O'Hare demanded. Then comes the decision that changes everything. On April 26, 1942, the Bureau of Aeronautics orders Grumman to install the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp into the second prototype. The same engine powering the F-4U Corsair and the P-47 Thunderbolt. 2,000 horsepower, 18 cylinders, two-stage supercharger. The transformation is immediate. The XF6F3 first flies on July 30, 1942, just weeks after the original prototype. Test pilot Selden Converse lands after the first flight, climbs out of the cockpit, and delivers a verdict that echoes through naval aviation. This airplane is perfect. Engineer Hal Andrews will later say it may be the only fighter that was completely right from the start. It does not need years of refinement. It does not need radical redesign. It simply works. The R2800 gives the Hellcat exactly what Grumman wanted. Massive power at altitude, reliability under damage, the ability to haul armor, ammunition, and fuel without sacrificing climb. Around the engine, engineers build a cockpit designed for survival. Steel armor behind the pilot's seat. Bullet-resistant glass in the windscreen. Self-sealing fuel tanks capable of taking multiple hits without igniting. Then they arm it. 6 Browning M250 caliber machine guns. 3 in each wing. 400 rounds per gun. 2,400 rounds total. 600 pounds of ammunition alone. Set to converge at 300 yards, creating a dense kill zone where 80 heavy bullets pass through every second. This is not a duelist's weapon. It is an executioner. The Hellcat is heavy. Empty, it weighs over 9,000 pounds. Loaded, it approaches 13,000. With external stores, more than 15,000. Its wingspan stretches over 42 feet. Pilots stepping up from the Wildcat are stunned by its size. But when they push the throttle forward, doubts vanish. The Hellcat accelerates. It climbs. It responds smoothly and predictably. It forgives mistakes. It does not punish the inexperienced. It was designed with one brutal truth in mind. America will train thousands of pilots. They will not all be aces. Their aircraft must keep them alive. Production begins before the factory is even finished. Grumman builds plant number 3 at Bethpage, using steel from New York's dismantled 2nd Avenue Elevated Railway. Workers assemble aircraft while construction crews build walls around them. By October 1942, the first production F6F3s are flying. By early 1943, they are headed for the Pacific. And soon, Japanese pilots will meet the full weight of that decision, not in a design office, but in the unforgiving mathematics of aerial combat. Trial by fire in the Central Pacific. January 1943. The Pacific Fleet begins to receive the first operational F6F Hellcats. Fighting Squadron 9, VF9, is among the first units to trade in their Wildcats. When Lieutenant Commander Phil Torrey walks slowly around the new fighter on the carrier deck, his skepticism is obvious. He studies the massive fuselage, the thick wings, the wide landing gear. This thing weighs as much as a torpedo bomber, he mutters. Can it even dogfight? The answer will come not from theory, but from blood, fuel, and fire. August 31st, 1943. Marcus Island. Task Force 15 approaches the remote Japanese base more than 1,000 miles southeast of Tokyo. The carriers Essex, Yorktown, and Independence carry something the Japanese have never faced before. Entire squadrons of Hellcats, flown by pilots trained specifically to exploit their strengths. At 4:15 a.m., in darkness broken only by red deck lights, the first Hellcats launch. Commander James Flatley's aircraft is the first off Yorktown's deck. The R2800 howls at full power. The Hellcat surges forward and lifts cleanly, climbing hard into the night sky. Deck crews stare after it, shaking their heads. Wildcats never did that. The strike reaches Marcus Island at dawn. Japanese bombers sit lined up on the airfield, engines cold, crews unprepared. Hellcats drop to strafing altitude, 6 guns hammering in disciplined bursts. Aircraft erupt in flames. Fuel tanks detonate. Hangars collapse under repeated passes. By the end of the day, most of Marcus Island's facilities are wrecked. But air combat, the true measure of a fighter, is still ahead. September 1st, 1943. Baker and Howland Islands. 2 Hellcats from USS Independence spot a low-flying contact over the water. It is a Kawanishi H-8K Emily, one of Japan's most formidable patrol aircraft. Its gunners open fire early, confident in their reach. Tracers streak past the American fighters. Lieutenant Richard Lowe does not break. He presses in, steady and calm, closing to 400 yards before firing. The combined weight of 6 50 caliber guns tears into the Emily's wing root. Fire erupts. The massive flying boat shudders, rolls, and crashes into the sea. The Hellcat's first aerial kill is recorded. Then comes October 5th, 1943. Over Wake Island, 91 Hellcats from Task Force 14 meet 50 Zeros head-on. Japanese pilots climb aggressively, expecting the Americans to stall and scatter. Instead, the Hellcats hold formation and climb with them. At 20,000 feet, the Americans roll over and attack. The engagement is devastating. Hellcats slash through the Zero formation, firing short, lethal bursts, then climbing back to altitude before the Japanese can respond. Zeros that try to turn are ignored. Zeros that try to climb are followed and destroyed. 28 Japanese fighters fall from the sky. 2 Hellcats are lost. The message spreads rapidly through Japanese naval aviation. The Americans have a fighter that can climb with the Zero and survive its guns. Traditional tactics are no longer reliable. Experience, once Japan's greatest advantage, is suddenly devalued. For American pilots, confidence grows with every mission. The Hellcat is forgiving. It absorbs damage and brings them home. It gives rookies a fighting chance against veterans. Training doctrine evolves quickly. Never turn with a Zero. Use altitude. Use speed. Make one pass, then climb. By November 1943, Hellcats are fighting over Rabaul, one of Japan's strongest air bases. F-6 F-3s and F-4U Corsairs together smash Japanese air defenses, destroying nearly 50 aircraft in a single day of fighting. Japanese losses are irreplaceable. American losses are not. On November 26th, Edward Butch O'Hare, the man who helped force the Hellcat into existence, disappears during a night mission over the Gilberts. Confusion, darkness, and friendly fire claim him, not enemy guns. The irony is cruel, but his vision is already written across the sky. By the end of 1943, the Central Pacific belongs to the Hellcat. And still, the decisive test lies ahead. Because while the Hellcat has proven it can win battles, it has not yet fought the war Japan is saving its strength for. A final, desperate gamble that will throw everything the Imperial Navy has left into the air at once. The Great Test of Supremacy. June 19, 1944. The Philippine Sea. The ocean is calm, almost deceptively peaceful, stretching blue and endless beneath a blazing tropical sun. Beneath that calm, the fate of the Pacific War is about to be decided. Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher's Task Force 58 steams west with 15 aircraft carriers and more than 900 aircraft. Arrayed against them is Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's first mobile fleet. 5 fleet carriers. For light carriers, 430 aircraft. This is Japan's last chance to break American momentum. Japanese commanders believe this battle will restore balance. They are wrong. At 10 a.m., radar operators aboard USS Lexington detect incoming contacts. The blips multiply quickly. The first Japanese strike wave is inbound. Commander Charles Brewer, fighter director aboard Lexington, studies the scope. He does not hesitate. Vector all Hellcats to intercept. Across the fleet, Hellcats roar off carrier decks and climb into the sky. 220 F-6 F-3s and F-6 F-5s form layered defensive belts. positioning themselves between the Japanese formation and the American ships. Pilots settle into their cockpits with practiced calm. They have trained for this moment for months. The Japanese strike arrives in disarray. Many pilots are young. Some have less than 100 hours total flight time. They fly Zeros, Judas, and Kates, aircraft once feared, now tragically outmatched. The Hellcats fall on them with merciless precision. Lieutenant Alexander Vrashu, already an ace, leads his division into a formation of Yokosuka D-4 wide Judy dive bombers. He does not spray fire. He waits. At close range, he fires short, controlled bursts. One Judy explodes. A second catches fire. A third disintegrates. In 8 minutes, Vrashu destroys 6 aircraft using only 360 rounds. His gun camera records everything. When he lands back aboard Lexington, he climbs from the cockpit and holds up 6 fingers to Admiral Mitcher watching from the bridge. A photographer captures the moment. The image will become iconic. Wave after wave of Japanese aircraft meet the same fate. The first wave loses 42 of 69 aircraft. The second wave loses more than 100 out of 128. The third and fourth waves fare no better. Hellcats climb to meet them, dive through them, then climb again, refusing every attempt at a turning fight. Japanese pilots try to flee upward. The Hellcats follow. They try to dive away. The Hellcats stay with them. They try to fight. They die. By nightfall, 315 Japanese aircraft are destroyed in the air. Another 50 are wiped out on Guam. American losses amount to fewer than 24 Hellcats in aerial combat. The imbalance is so extreme that American pilots give the battle a name that captures its one-sided brutality. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. For Japanese naval aviation, it is an extinction event. Survivors return to their carriers in shock, many carriers now nearly empty of aircraft. Reports speak of American fighters that cannot be shaken, cannot be outrun, cannot be outclimbed. One recovered Japanese combat report states simply, "We had no tactic that worked. We could only die." The kill ratio is calculated later. 19-1. The Hellcat has done more than win a battle. It has destroyed the core of Japan's carrier pilot corps. Experience, once Japan's greatest strength, is gone in a single day. From this moment on, the skies belong to the United States. The Gray Ghost and the end of the myth. Summer 1944. The Pacific sky is no longer contested. Hellcats roam freely over the Marianas, the Philippines, and the open ocean, climbing unchallenged to altitude, diving at will, choosing when and how every engagement begins. Japanese aircraft still appear, but now in 1s and 2s, flown by pilots who know the odds and fly anyway. Radio intercepts capture their fear. American fighters above us, unable to engage, request permission to withdraw. The Hellcat has become something more than an aircraft. To Japanese pilots, it is a presence. Gray, heavy, seemingly immortal. They call it the Gray Ghost. By October 1944, Japanese naval aviation is a shadow of what it once was. At Leyte Gulf, the remaining Japanese carriers sail not as striking forces, but as decoys, stripped of most of their aircraft. When Hellcats from Task Force 38 find them off Cape Engano, the outcome is inevitable. Zuikaku, Zuho, Chitose, and Chiyoda, carriers that once symbolized Japanese dominance, are sent to the bottom. The few aircraft they carry are swept from the sky in minutes. American aces rise rapidly. David McCampbell scores 34 victories. Cecil Harris claims 24. Eugene Valencia, 23. Alex Vrashu, 19. 307 Navy and Marine pilots become aces flying the Hellcat, more than in any other American fighter. The numbers tell the story with brutal clarity. 5,156 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat by F6F Hellcats. 75% of all U.S. Navy air-to-air victories in the war. Only 270 Hellcats lost in aerial combat. 19-1. No fighter before or since has matched it. Late war evaluations confirm what pilots already know. The Hellcat is not the fastest aircraft. The Corsair is slightly quicker. But no fighter offers the same complete package. Climb, firepower, protection, reliability, ease of flying, survivability. It brings pilots home. When the war ends in August 1945, Hellcats still sit on the decks of every American fleet carrier. They have escorted bombers, supported landings, hunted at night with radar-equipped variants, blasted ground targets with bombs and rockets, done everything asked of them without complaint. Japanese commanders reflect afterward on what defeated them. Admiral Mato Magaki does not hesitate. Once the Hellcat appeared, we knew the war was lost. We could not match its combination of performance, firepower, and protection. In museums today, restored F6F Hellcats sit quietly, their broad wings folded, paint faded but proud. They look heavy, plain, unremarkable. They are none of those things. On October 5, 1943, Toshiyuki Sueda looked at one and saw a wildcat. He trusted experience. He trusted old equations. He trusted that American aircraft could not change. He was wrong. When Japanese pilots radioed American fighters climbing like Zeros, they were not describing a maneuver. They were announcing the end of an era. The Zero's greatest strength had been matched. Everything else had been surpassed. The Grumman F6F Hellcat did not just win air superiority. It erased the myth of Japanese invincibility. It turned predators into prey. It carried inexperienced pilots into combat and brought them home alive. It transformed desperation into dominance. The Hellcat climbed like a Zero, and then it killed it. Thank you for watching.